Okay, it's snowing again here in Fraser Park, and boy, I was just thinking we're on lesson 357. We just have a few more to go, and then there something's going to happen. I can't, I'm not going to do this every day, although I've been asked to do something, so I will do something regularly. I would say at least once a week. I don't really know what. Well, I have an idea. Maybe that's something I should talk about, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. So we're on lesson number 357. What am I? Is the contemplation, and we're learning what I am. There was a discussion on the internet today on Facebook in one of the Course in Miracles pages about the ability to open your mind. Now, if mind training of A Course in Miracles at first has to show you the difference between what it is to have an open mind and have a closed mind. And remember, the ego is always going to use the words in this book. This is important. Your ego, the ego. Remember, it speaks first. Ego always speaks first. The ego is always going to use these words. Any words, actually. The ego is always going to use these words in a way to thwart you from the purpose that the words are being given to you by Jesus in order for you to open your mind, because the ego doesn't want you to open your mind. Yet the ego will define these words in such a way, and has been so cunning, baffling, and insidious since the beginning of space and time. It'll define these ways in such a way so as to convince you that you have actually had the experiences and therefore know what they are and mean, in spite of the fact that you don't. So there's something about these lessons that I've learned from hanging around with the old man who used to talk about the back door to things. Because remember, your mind in space and time is split, and therefore it always has an option. It's front door and a back door. There's two sides, everything. Okay, so there's this back door to understanding the Course in Miracles when you can enforce the honesty upon yourself, because your dedication is true, because your heart, you really do want a pure heart, and because you're beginning to understand from the devastating experiences that the world of space and time seems to allow to occur to everything and everyone, that another way may be possible. And the other way isn't in any of the ways you're seeing in the world, for sure, because I listen to the news. They're just rehashing the same. It's a fragmentation of the same problem. The same problem keeps on fragmenting and hiding. It's the Course says, the ego asks the same question over and over again in many forms. How did the impossible happen? And every time, you seek an answer outside of yourself, what you do is you fragment the problem into greater, smaller problems. They're all equal, of course, rather than going in. Now you're going to have to go back. So that's why the advice is always going to be to stop. But the ego is always going to co-opt everything, because it learns to use everything against you, because it has been doing so since the beginning of time, unbeknownst to you. And we're just becoming conscious of what it does and how it works. Now, because of the nature of the miracle and who we are in reality, the speed up that occurs each and every time we have one of these experiences, and the consistency that we can only enforce upon ourselves in the willingness to follow the instructions and the guidance that we get, with the recognition that the ego could always co-opt us, to me always necessitated a way of understanding, or a way of, of utilizing these things that were foolproof. And that's what Jesus says, this is foolproof if you choose to use it. But fools don't always choose to use what's good for them, which is why which is why we needed something in the first place, okay? In the second place, in the first place, if we just left, we wouldn't have been doing this right now. Okay, so there's a back door that I want to talk about in relationship to 357, and you can utilize it at any point in time. Whenever you come upon some of the radical statements about what's occurring, you can utilize it to gain integrity within your own system and not have the ego co-opt it, because you can use both sides of the split in your mind to focus yourself on the truth when it is the truth you want. Simply because you no longer want anything of this world. And that's what we've been training our mind to do over and over again. Now, what I also want to say is this, in regards to a discussion I read on one of Course in Miracles pages today, was this: having trained your mind and utilized Jesus as your teacher and the principles, and done what he said, you should eventually, if not now and already, understand how to open your own mind or move your mind in the direction where it opens to the light of the solution. Otherwise, these lessons are meaningless and offer you nothing. Your mind is very lawful and it's yours. You can make decisions that impact the use, and that's the entire nature. Now, there have been times, this is what the tenure that was being discussed. Yes, there have been times in everyone's life, because Jesus says no one is here without some experience of light. There has been spontaneous moments at times in everyone's life. Once in a while you get shown the light in the strangest places if you look at it right. Okay, and you can't help looking at it right once in a while, because the truth is there's only two ways of looking at it, and only one way produces the effect. Yeah. Okay. Now, it does happen spontaneously, but this is what I want to say about this, and even spontaneous awakenings, and even seemingly experiences that happen in the presence of what you call spiritual adepts or teachers, who tend to take credit rather than give credit to where the true credit can be given, which is to the power that created us and allows our mind to be so exquisitely created that we can make decisions for ourselves, get the result of it, dream that we're getting horrible results, sickness, pain, suffering, yet still exist within a mind of love that doesn't allow that to be true, because in our reality there is only love. And that's where you got to get to from within the dream, okay? Now, spontaneously it happens, but I guarantee you, spontaneously, when it just happens spontaneously, because in some way, shape, or form, and this is what happens with alcoholics or people recovering from addictions when they talk about in desperation. When you finally surrender for no reason whatsoever and you just give up, not expecting any result at all, you just don't defend yourself, let's say. You finally put your mind in the position where the light can enter in and you can have an experience. But it's a very lawful experience when you look at something like A Course in Miracles or even the 12-step program to show you how to do that, so when you practice it consistently over and over again and demand the experience by utilizing the split in your mind to maintain the space where the experience to come, and watching your mind for when it happens and when it doesn't happen, and admitting that there are times when it doesn't happen and it does happen, you can learn how to have it happen and then have it become so much ingrained in you, as much as the idea of separation and without the Holy Spirit and the Spirit was, that you become, in a sense, available and can be used. That's when you become a miracle worker, because your mind is sufficiently healed and opened, and your purpose has been enough time reinforced by the single purpose of the atonement and salvation, to recognize, even if you get lost momentarily, that you're not going to wander too far down the road anymore because you know what's good for you, and it's got nothing to do with this world of space and time. So you must learn to utilize your mind in a way that allows the truth to flow, and recognize when it's not happening that you have not been using your mind that way, and don't judge yourself. Don't judge yourself, but trust that in God everything is possible, and you are already in God. Everything's possible in you. It's your mind, and you can decide. Okay? Truth answers every call we make to God. This is 357. Responding first with miracles, and then returning us to be itself. Okay? First, the miracle is going to take place. Then we're going to be made true, because we're going to be purified of the necessity. We can be purified of the fear and guilt that keeps us from recognizing that we have always been true, and we can be true anytime we decide. Okay? Truth answers every call we make to God. Let me just take that statement for a second. Now, what this is saying is, truth answers every call we make to God, and it's an experience. It's not a concept, although that's a conceptual statement that reflects the truth of something Jesus learned, put into words, and now is useful to you when you utilize it as joining with him because you know it's going to work. But here's what you have to do. Truth answers every call we make to God. I recognize whenever I make a true call to God and experience results that opens my mind to the light, and the light of the totality of who I am always gives answers specifically to the problems that I seem to have perceptually. Because every problem I seem to have perceptually in the world of space and time stems from a single problem of separation, in the fragmentation that seems to be the consciousness that we think of as man and mankind, in bodily association to the physical form of the world that we seem to exist in. Okay? Now, truth answers every call we make to God. The experience that we have is one, and this is what it's saying, of a miracle that shifts our perception to show us that we've never not been true, and we've never not had the solution, and then the solution's made manifest and goes before us to straighten the way and narrow the path. And then returns us to the experience of recognize that we are true itself. That's the sequence that we're going through. And we go through it as rapidly as we can until it's only that action in our mind. Now, this is what I'm going to say. Here's how to utilize your mind and the back door in a way so you could always integrate these experientially. And by now, I'm going to remind you, and you should be remembering, way back in the beginning of the course, there was a line that says, this is not a course in judgment. These are not to be used to judge you, because this is the course in freeing yourself from judgment by practicing these principles. The failure, I don't know how I teach it. In the totality of the return of the Son of God, who for a second thought he was separate and therefore dreamed, a dream of separation, which included a beginning and an end and a return. Okay. In the totality of that happening, and the fulfillment of God's promise of salvation, a timeline seemingly occurred. And that timeline is not alterable because it's etched into the plan itself, from the completion part back to the beginning, so that when it's over, it precludes the ability for ever happen, and that sequence is set as what space and time is. When we're in space and time, we actually think that there are things that can happen and things that cannot happen. There are things that do happen, and there are things that didn't, and things that didn't happen. That's the nature of the duality of our mind. The truth of the matter is, from the position that Jesus is operating in, and that I hold in my mind with him, because I've seen it and been there, and it's there. It's a constancy. It's there. What can I tell you? Okay? Only what did happen in the fulfillment of the plan for atonement is what's on the final record that brought it to a close so that it could never have happened again or in the first place. All right? That must include the mistakes that you made that allowed you to recognize the correction, as well as the corrective procedure for the mistakes that you were going back in your mind, healing, so as to come into a presence, and that presence goes into eternity. You got that? When the talks about the script is written, that's what we're saying, because everyone has already done everything that they were required to do from a particular perspective. And there's a keeper of that record known as Jesus as the Christ, and he shares that with us so that we can gain certainty. Yet the ego is always going to tell you, well, what about this? If that happened, this could have happened, and it didn't happen. Something does and something doesn't happen all the time. All right? I'm telling you, from the certainty of my mind, in the recognition of the fulfillment of the plan for atonement, that only what could happen, only thing that ever happened, is what did happen and could happen within the fulfillment of the plan in its totality, and within the cycle of your sojourn in space and time. The ego wants to tell you that's the questioning component. It's ambiguous constantly, okay? But we can use that to our advantage in choosing when we recognize without guilt, shame, because we understand we no longer need to judge, and judgments are false anyway. Truth answers every call we make to God. If I make a call to God, and it's a truly made call, it results in an experience. If I make a call, if I think I make a call to God, and it doesn't result in an experience, I can con myself by rearranging perceptually all manner of stuff to think I got an answer. Or I can recognize the manner in which I was using my mind when I didn't have the experience was different from the manner in which I was using my mind when I did have the experience. So therefore now you say, okay, I get it. It's lawful. Truth answers every call we make to God. I only want the truth. If I don't have an experience, I haven't called unto God. Not as a judgment, but as a practicality of learning within the midterm of the examination of your own consciousness for the healing and purification of that which is in love. It's quite useful, because that's what time is for when given to the hands of the Holy Spirit, not to continue to make you guilty, but allow you to recognize your own wholeness, your own perfection, the perfection wholeness of your brother, as shared within the kingdom, and the recognition that that kingdom can be seen right here, right now, when I give up what it isn't, without having to make up in my mind what it is given to me, right there. Forgiveness, truth reflection, tells me how to offer miracles, and thus escape the prison house in which I think I live. Your Holy Son is pointed out to me, first in my brother, then in me. I'm going to use the reflection, the ego that I made my brother, in his willingness to play his part in my drama, as a way of truing up by recognizing I'm going to project onto him that which I don't want to be responsible for and are terrified about in myself. And I'm going to be grateful now that I've learned to see that, and my brother isn't against me, Seen rightly, we're all for a single thing because we all have a single purpose. So they say, wow, like first of all, say, the regular chairman myself, I've had an experience. Okay, I know what the Christ is. Okay, that's fine. Let's give granted. Okay, so now you're walking down the street and something happens and she bursts, oh, he's not the Christ. That's not Christly. Wait a second. But I want to see the Christ in my brother. Oh, because if I see the Christ in my brother, I can also see the Christ in me. You see how you're beginning to learn to use your mind and use the situations that you find yourself in that are the projections of the mind of the separated zone in order to hold yourself in integrity and honesty, not to judge yourself or your brother, but so you could have the experiences that are required of you and that you have actually had. As we go back to this to recognize, and the more you recognize the strength of who you are, the more you recognize what was accomplished by that strength without your need to do anything but show up and say yes, which is what this is going to say. Your voice instructs me patiently to hear your word and give as I receive. And as I look upon your son today, I hear your voice instructing me to find the way to you, as you appointed that way shall be. There it is. You appointed the way that shall be. There's a whole nother way I could talk about that. Behold the sinlessness and you are healed. So it always becomes the procedure always, if I want to see my own sinlessness, and I'm looking around and I'm not seeing sinlessness in my brother is playing the part perfectly to allow me the reminder that I need to take that pause, hold myself within the integrity of a true way of using, or a useful, helpful way of using the split we already recognize we have in our mind, so that truth can answer the call we make to God, and God can respond with the miracle of the recognition that we are his son and have never left home, and then returned unto us that which we have always been.